Hi everybody, I'm Bob Kendrick, president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas City, Missouri. Henry Aaron means the world to me. He is my all-time favorite Major League Baseball player. He is my childhood idol as a kid growing up in tiny Crawfordville, Georgia. All of 500 people, 80 miles east of Atlanta, 50 miles west of Augusta, right down Interstate 20. So I am tremendously honored and humbled to reflect on where his illustrious professional baseball career began, the Negro Leagues. My favorite photograph in the entire exhibition is a relatively nondescript photograph of a then 18-year-old Henry Aaron standing at the train station in Mobile, Alabama. And at his feet is a duffel bag. And when I had the opportunity to tour him through the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum for the first time in 1999, he told me, he says, "Bob, I may have had 2 changes of clothes in that bag, $1.50 in my pocket, and a ham sandwich that my mama had made me, going to go chase that dream, headed to the Indianapolis Clowns, a skinny, cross-handed hitting shortstop. When he gets to the Clowns, they put the right hand on top, and the rest, as they say, is history." He would shortly after be discovered by the Boston Braves, who would become the Milwaukee Braves, who would become my beloved Atlanta Braves. And Henry Aaron will go down in this game as one of his all-time greatest players. But more importantly, Henry Aaron will go down in the annals of American history as one of the greatest human beings to ever walk the face of this earth. So on behalf of our team here at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, I extend my heartfelt condolences to the Aaron family, and particularly Mrs. Aaron, for sharing my childhood idol and giving me an opportunity to touch greatness. God bless each and every one of you, and thank you so much.